So for my project, I went to the Fargo Air Museum. I took time out of my weekend over President's Day weekend to drive down there um, just for the day. Little history of the Fargo Air Museum is that it's located in Fargo, North Dakota. It's located on the Hector International Airport near the campus of North Dakota State University. It was created by a group of warplane restorers and military people who came together in the 1990s to share their passion for aviation. In 2001, they opened their first hangar, and they were able to pay off their debt by 2008 of the first hangar, and they were able to open a second hangar in 2013, being able to provide more aircrafts to show to the public. Looking at some of my first aircraft that I documented was the L-39 Aero Vodaki jet trainer, a Czechoslovakian aircraft manufacturer. Aero Vodaki made a new design in 1964 to replace the L-29 Delphin jet trainer, the old jet trainer at the time. The L-39 became the primary trainer in the Warsaw Pact nations. In 1972, the majority of countries in the Warsaw Pact preferred the L-39 Albatross for jet training because of how good it was. One of my favorite aircrafts at the Fargo Air Museum was the MQ-1 Predator. It was originally designed to be a reconnaissance drone, and it was called the RQ-1. Um, Obviously, it's an unmanned aircraft, and in 2002, the Air Force changed its purpose to a multi-purpose reconnaissance drone. They added AGM-114 Hellfire missiles, and a rover camera was added to offer real-time video feed. By 2014, Predators and Reapers had 2.5 million flight hours, with 90% being combat. This just shows how the demand and usefulness for UAV operations were and still are. Another interesting plane that I thought was at the Fargo Air Museum was the Starduster 2. It's just a simple biplane used for air shows. It went to Oshkosh many times, and it was a home-built biplane built by Thomas F. Shida in 1987, and he won an award for it at Oshkosh called the Lindy Award for custom-built outstanding workmanship in 1988. I just thought it was interesting because it was an interesting design for a biplane, and it looks a lot similar to all the other biplanes we saw earlier this year in the movies we watched. One of the most interesting aircrafts that I wanted to go into at the Fargo Air Museum was the Fairchild PT-19. Going into World War II, most pilots still learned how to fly with biplane training aircrafts, and it was really hard to transfer that training into um, real war situations when they were flying uh, more advanced aircrafts. So in 1938, they decided to change their training aircrafts by providing a new training vessel to match the more advanced fighter aircrafts pilots would be flying in their war situations. The Fairchild Primary Trainer, or PT, was developed and first flew in May 15th, 1939. And after Japan bombed Pearl Harbor in 1941, the need for pilots increased heavily. There was a big need, and the need for aircrafts also increased heavily. So this led to the Fairchild needing more subcontractors, so they were able to build more and produce more. Some of these subcontractors were the Canadian Fleet Aircraft, Howard Aircraft, St. Louis Aircraft, and Aeronca, so that more training aircrafts could be manufactured and more pilots could be trained. Some more facts about the Fairchild PT-19. It was mass produced, um, and with this mass production of the PT-19, there was multiple variations that came with it. These variations were PT-19, the PT-23, and the PT-26. These three variations were comprised of the same airframe. They looked a lot the same. The only major differences was that the PT-23 had a 220 horsepower radial engine, and the PT-26 had a closed cockpit. As you can see, this one, the PT-19, doesn't have a closed cockpit, but they did make a model of it with one. Fact check that I wanted to do for this aircraft was, according to a website I use called aerocenter.com, the Fairchild PT-19 had a 200 horsepower engine, and on the plaque displayed at the Fargo Air Museum, it first said it had a 175 horsepower engine, but then they later upgraded to have a 200 horsepower engine. So the plaque displayed at the museum did show the correct information, and also displayed that it was comprised of a steel tube fuselage, the fabric cover with which also was backed up from aerocenter.com. So overall, the Fargo Air Museum does a really good job implementing correct facts and statements about the aircrafts. And looking at their other plaques, I also noticed that all their facts about the aircrafts were pretty accurate as well. Going on to one of the bigger aircrafts I noticed at the Fargo Air Museum was the Grumman TBF Avenger. Typically, when it comes to museums and bringing attention, the bigger pieces and bigger aircrafts typically bring more attention. And the Grumman TBF Avenger, being one of the bigger aircrafts at the Fargo Air Museum, is considered to be like the major centerpiece for this museum. When I first walked into the museum, for example, the Grumman Avenger was the first thing that caught my attention. The Grumman TBF Avenger entered the war in 1942 as a torpedo bomber, and its first battle was the Battle of Midway, and it was the heaviest single-engine aircraft during World War II. The TBF Avenger had 3 crew members occupied in it. There was the pilot, a radio man, and a turret gunner. The radio man even had to use a 30 caliber turret that was located near the rear of the aircraft, while the turret gunner used a 50 caliber turret located near the front. Looking at the biggest plane at the Fargo Air Museum that was located in the second hangar was the Douglas DC-3 C-47. The Douglas DC-3 was developed in the 1930s, first took flight on December 17th, 1935. It was considered to be the first transport airliner to carry passengers to make profit. The C-47 was a slightly altered version of the DC-3. It just had slight modifications like a cargo door in the back and a stronger floor with a shorter tail. The DC-3 and C-47s were used in World War II for transporting cargo and troops, and even wounded, in and out of war situations. And in the invasion of Sicily in 1943, this DC-3 and C-47 dropped 4,381 paratroopers, and over 50,000 troops were dropped during the invasion of Normandy. This shows that this was an all-around useful aircraft at the time for both transportation for the public and for military use as well. Another interesting aircraft I wanted to document was the P-51 Mustang. This was the British asked the United States to build Curtiss P-40 fighters in 1940. The USA decided to build a better fighter for them. This was the P-51D. It arrived in Europe in 1944 and became the primary long-range escort fighter in the Air Force from the USA. And by the end of World War II, the P-51D took down 4,950 enemy aircrafts, which is more than any other USA Air Force fighter in Europe. Here's some other aircrafts I wanted to document, and some other pieces I thought were interesting at the Fargo Air Museum. One of the more fun pieces that they offered at the Fargo Air Museum was the Jelly Bean Interstate Cadet. Um, Good museum finds ways to appeal to all audiences and all age groups. Fun and colorful pieces typically gain more attention from the younger audiences. The Jelly Bean Interstate Cadet was an 800-pound Interstate Cadet stunt plane, and this aircraft was meant to perform peak entertainment. And the pilot, Kent Peach, did an incredible job entertaining his fans through his performance and use of creative and colorful detail. The museum offered many more ideas of entertainment to younger audiences, like providing a movie of the um, Disney movie planes and the use of this plane as well. Here are my references.